Pastor Dalrock writes another article entitled Love Struck. And the main point of the article is to say that what nearly all modern Christians have done is to place romantic love above marriage. Instead of seeing marriage as the moral context to pursue romantic love and sex, romantic love is now seen as the moral place to experience sex and marriage. And in the article, he's talking about how we got from there to gay marriage then as well, and the acceptance of gay marriage. It says this inversion is subtle enough that no one seems to have noticed, but if you look for it, you will see it everywhere. You'll see it everywhere. So no one in the church or outside of the church has really noticed this subtle change. He's saying modern Christians and non-Christians alike have embraced, in place of biblical marriage, a marriage that is centered around romantic love. This transformational shift has been so complete and so insidious that unless you have actively considered the idea, you almost certainly have at least partly adopted the new mind frame yourself. Now, that's an interesting statement. I think of this because a friend of mine one time we were talking about arranged marriage and if you would go and get a mail order bride, and how he was saying that's basically prostitution if you would go and get yourself a mail order bride. And so I thought about that and I was like, and I think that goes back to this idea that we have in the modern world, we have placed romantic love above marriage. And so he says, consider, an average player, a cad, this kind of guy. Maybe he wears a hat like this and he's got a feather in it, or something. But the average player, he loves many of the women he has sex with, and he would admit that sex is more enjoyable when you experience it both physically and emotionally, this romantic love idea. So this player, he has sex with romantic love for the same reason you might have sprinkles on your ice cream. You just like it better that way. So in the article, he submits that lifetime marriage with separate defined roles for husband and wife and true commitment is what makes sex and romantic love moral in the biblical view. In our new view, then, romantic love is what makes sex moral. And the purpose of marriage is to publicly declare that you are experiencing the highest form of romantic love. Thus, people now commonly refer to a wedding as making our love official in the wedding. Now, that's a kind of a small shift, but it's really profound. He says, we take great care to distinguish between pure love, true love, and then mere infatuation or puppy love. But according to Scripture, there's no biblical basis for this kind of thinking. He says the reality is physical sex naturally tends to create feelings of romantic love. So he's saying we get married, and within that context, then we have romantic love and sex. When channeled correctly, this is both moral and incredibly enjoyable. And so he's saying now we have a paradigm of only in a world of sex outside of marriage is there a need to distinguish between the gradients of romantic love, where some forms are more pure and authentic than others. So he says now the Apostle Paul advises us on marriage when he tells us only to marry if we burn with passion. That's in 1 Corinthians 7. There is no worry about true love versus puppy love, etc., because such thoughts are meaningless in this context. If the couple has strong sexual romantic attraction and they are prepared to commit for life and fulfill the roles of husband and wife, then they should marry. But he's saying the Apostle Paul's advice runs counter to what we now consider a woman's sacred path to marriage. The modern view is that women especially need to experience falling in love and out of love and a sufficient number of times to identify the real thing. So he says marriage in this context is just a public assertion of true love, and there is no concept of commitment outside of romantic love. And I think he is exactly correct, and that is why marriage is doing so poorly in 2023 here. And so he concludes his article with, because it is love and not marriage which now confers morality upon sex, sex outside of marriage is considered moral as long as you are in love. Thus we have the modern harlot's defense anthem, but we are in love. You know, if we're fornicating, if we're having an adultery, if we're doing all these things, but we're in love, so it's okay. It is also entirely logical then for homosexuals to demand the equal right to declare your love via marriage under this new twisted paradigm. And I think that's right. It's love wins. Love conquers all, blah, blah, blah. That's the main message for, or that's what it started as with when they lit up the White House with the rainbow colors and all that. Love wins. Well, anyway, we got to get this turned around. We got to get this turned around. With all this happening, we can still say that Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Postmillennial Man.